When it comes to traveling with a toddler, whether you're traveling by yourself or if you're traveling with another adult, it can be a little bit overwhelming with the idea of trying to keep them entertained. Well, today one mom wrote, "I have an infant and a 3-year-old, and we have a long car trip coming up, and I'm already feeling myself getting stressed over it. Any suggestions for keeping my toddler entertained and the baby calm? If one ends up having a meltdown, we'll be crying by the time we get there." I can completely relate. I have had several long car trips in my motherhood experience and journey, whether we were going across the states to visit relatives and family, or when we were actually picking up and moving and had like over a 13-hour car ride just to get there, where I was driving by myself with 2 young kids in the back seat. I definitely have some tips and suggestions for you. But if we haven't hung out before, my name is Brianna. I'm a fellow mom and money coach, and here we talk about all things real money and real life from moms for moms just like you. But with that, let's go ahead and dive into today's conversation. So let's go ahead and address the infant first. Now, in your question, you don't specifically state how long your car trip is. So this could be anywhere from, I'm assuming anywhere from like an hour, because some moms kind of consider like an hour-long car trip is a long time, and it is with an infant and a toddler. To anywhere to my experience where it's like an entire day, like 13 hours in the car or more. So depending on what your circumstances are, of course, you're going to adjust these suggestions to whatever your unique variables are. So the first one is keeping our babies comfortable. So I did not have a back-facing camera for my infant, and I was fine going without it. But I do have a friend who is more of a gadget mom, and she has told me, she's like, this isn't necessary, but it definitely makes my life easier. So that would be something that I might recommend depending on the length of your car trip, especially if you don't already have one, and especially if you're traveling by yourself, because sometimes if your baby is crying, you don't really know because you can't see since they're facing, the back of your car. Are they crying because they're tired? Are they crying because they need something? Are they crying because they're uncomfortable and something's falling in their face? And just having that rear-facing camera can especially avoid unnecessary delays when you're traveling by yourself, or if you are traveling for a long period of time. Since we'll be talking about several different resources, I'll link these all in the show notes of this episode. So that way, if there is something that you are interested in, you can go there and start your research process. The second thing for your baby is a towel. And I am sure that you have some towel somewhere in your home that you can use for this. And that is to simply put a towel where the butt of your baby would be resting in their car seat, because as they sit there and the longer they sit there, that padding compresses down, and you just want to give them a little extra padding, especially if they're going to be there for a long time. Now, depending on how big your baby is, if it's more of a newborn versus more of like a baby, closer to that 12-month mark, you might maybe not necessarily use a towel. And when I say towel, I mean more like a hand towel. Maybe it makes more sense for you to use like a washcloth, but just adding a little extra padding there for their butt to rest on will make them far more comfortable for the duration of your trip. The third thing is any type of toy, but the specific toy that I actually think that would work perfectly for them is a like spinner suction cup type toy. So these will stick to the windows, and that way your baby can kind of see them rotate and spin, or you can also put them in your baby's car seat with them to just have something else to play with or look at. And of course, there's a large variety of toys, but I do like the suction cup spinners. I could not find the same brand that I had, but my sons really enjoyed these. In fact, they played with them much further after, being an infant, because they were just so fun to play with. So your baby, especially given like the age, may also appreciate something like this as well. Let's move on to your toddler, because your toddler, I feel like from my own experience, is going to definitely need the most what's the right word? Most adjusting for, because they're used to running around. They're used to, they're used to being more active and more rambunctious. So I think it is a lot harder for them to actually stay more confined in a car seat, especially as the duration of that car trip gets longer and longer. So some of these suggestions that I'm going to have are going to vary specifically to whether or not you are traveling by yourself. Like some of them may not be reasonable for you, and also the ability of your toddler. So there's two categories. There's the entertainment category, and then there's the activity category. So let's first talk about entertainment, because I think entertainment, it's an easier default for me, I have found as a mom. So the first one is audio drama books. And if you don't have any, or if you're not really familiar with any to get started, like Winnie the Pooh or any type of like children's books that your kids enjoys. Now you can look for some on Audible. If you don't have an Audible subscription, you can also check out your local library. I have found that my local library has some really great resources for that, especially if they are used to already knowing certain characters like Winnie the Pooh, then they are more likely to actually listen to those stories while you're in the car. The other thing that is probably just a default is songs that they know. And given the length of your car trip, I would specifically suggest, just from my own experience and preference, that if I'm going to be in the car for a really long time, I'm only going to be bringing the songs that I'm willing to listen to for that duration of, 2, 3, 4 hours. Because if I'm the one driving and I'm, just can feel my anxiety and anxiousness and frustration level rising because I've listened to Baby Shark now for the 200th time, that's not helpful for me. So choose the songs that are going to be reasonable for you to listen to and be around for whichever length of trip that you're having. I know that at this age specifically, not every parent is very comfortable putting their kids in front of screens. Now, I will say when we were moving across the country and our trip was several hours long, I did not have a problem giving my child a tablet and saying, go for it. I specifically chose movies that I knew he would enjoy, that I could give him, that would keep his attention, that he already was familiar with. And it was really actually a great time for me to know, like, oh, when this movie is wrapping up, because I can hear it in the background, this is really a good time for us to like pull over, use the bathroom, do a diaper change, snacks, drinks, whatever, because it was like a natural built-in timer for me. But if you're like, no, I don't really want to do screens, or if it's just like not the best option for your child, another option is to still use movies, but hook that sound up to your car's studio system with a USB, and then play the movie, but just not give your child the screen to see. So again, it's very similar to that audiobook where they're hearing all of the characters, all of the sound effects in the background. They're just not watching the screen. So let's move on to the interactive items. The first thing that I would say is to help with the interactive things. I have found in my experience, even just like having gone on several different car rides as a kid, that it was really nice to be able to have a pillow to put in my lap to kind of create a table. Now, if you don't have a smaller pillow that you can give your child, you could just fold up a towel, or you can create one by like wrapping duct tape around it. But you can find some like smaller, what sizes are those? Oh, couch cushion type pillows at most department stores for really inexpensive. Now, if you are looking for something that's more kid friendly, like one specific brand that came out when I was a kid was Pillow Pets. I never had one, but I was like, this would be perfect if we were going on a car ride. It does seem like it's about the right size. But more recently is that they are making all of these new contraptions, and one of them is like a car seat tray. Now there's a couple of different brands and designs out there, so if this is something that's interesting to you, definitely do your research to figure out what might be the best one. But essentially it attaches onto and goes over your toddler's car seat to basically give them a tray or pockets and just like an activity area, so that way they can participate in more activities that may not actually be very feasible if they are just solely with their car seat. The first activity that I want to talk about is something that you probably already have, and it is simply a cookie sheet with magnets. Now, if you are like most moms, you have magnets, falling off your fridge and getting stuck underneath your refrigerator door, and you're fishing them out with a yardstick or a ruler. So if you just gather all of those up and put them in your car and have a, decent sized cookie sheet to allow your child to play and move on the magnets around, that's a really great option for like a very simple activity to do in the car. Now, the other thing that my sons really enjoy is a magnadoodle. In fact, we still take them on almost every car ride, even if it's, above that 20-minute threshold, just so that way they have them even if they never actually use them because they're, looking out the window or they're entertained in some other manner. So I really love a magnadoodle, and it also has that writing utensil already built in with a string, so you won't be having, be in the front of your car driving and then hearing from the back seat, "Mom, I dropped my pencil." that they can figure it out and take care of it themselves. Now, the other thing that I really like for longer car rides is reusable stickers. So this is where having like a tray or a table is going to be more helpful to your toddler. And again, it is going to be very specific based off of like their capability, especially if you're not back there helping them. But my sons have a really large Melissa and Doug. They have a couple of different activity pads that have several different reusable stickers with several different scenes. And it's really great because not only does it keep them entertained for a long period of time, but they can constantly go back and reuse it. So if they, may play with one scene for 10 minutes and then they go to another scene and play with that scene for 10 minutes, or they might pick up their magnadoodle and then come back to their stickers. So it's really helpful. Now, if you don't want to do reusable stickers, picking up regular traditional stickers and having some loose paper or a notepad with just like a pen or a pencil or crayons is a great option as well if they don't quite have that dexterity for that type of facility in the back seat just yet. Another great option that I really love is books. Now, you can just grab books off of your bookshelf, especially books that your child already gravitates to. But if you also want to give your child a new activity to keep them a little bit more entertained, create a little bit of novelty, again, if you are going on a longer car ride than normal, I really like the Wimmel books. Hopefully I'm saying them accurately. And they're very much like a Where's Waldo for toddlers. Not only does it have this entire big scene for you to find certain characters, but on every different page and every different scene, there's similar characters, so you can kind of follow their story throughout the book. And then it also creates some prompts in the back of the book where an adult can say "Oh, can you find, 3 birds? Can you find 3 or 4 shoes?" Or I don't know. There's elements within the book that you could facilitate more searchability versus just okay, we've read that book, we're done. If you don't have Wimble books, or if you're not interested in purchasing any of those, check out your library, because most library loans are about that 2 to 3 week threshold. And that's plenty of time that I have found in our travels to be able to pick out a set of new books to create some novelty for my kiddos, go on our trip, get back and return the books. And a lot of the time, if you are just knowing ooh, our trip is cutting a little bit close, or you get back and you're just like, I don't want to have to rush these back to the libraries the day after we get home. It's really easy. I have found for my local library, it would be surprised if other libraries are not like this, where you can just call and extend your loan on the books that you have checked out. Another thing to consider is if your child really likes weaving or interacting with like different tools, one thing that you can create is to take paper plates and just punch random holes in them with a hole punch, and then cut different lengths of yarn, or grab some old shoelaces and let your toddler weave the shoelaces or the yarn through the paper plates to create different designs. And I also love the fact that with this activity specifically, that if they don't love it, then it's not a huge investment. And also, if we get to our destination, or if we return home and I'm trying to clean out the car, the entire activity can just go into the trash if I need to, because it's like not super expensive and it's super disposable. Depending on how old your toddler is as well will depend on whether or not these last two activities are like appropriate for them. But one of them is picture bingo. So you can either make up bingo cards, or better yet, just ask your kid questions while you're driving. And if your child knows their letters or their numbers, or if that's something that you're working on, you can try doing the alphabet or the counting game as you go. So with picture bingo, it would just be like, can you find a yellow car? Can you find a bridge? Can you find a green sign? And I'm sure everyone else knows the alphabet and the number counting game, so I don't need to explain that to you. And then finally, Brain Quest for toddlers. So they have cards that are a little bit more educational in nature, where you can go through these with your 2 to 3 year old, and it will require you most likely to be in the backseat with them. So again, kind of keep that in mind with whether or not that makes sense for your travels. But it will give your toddler different questions that you can ask them, but it is in a way that they can stay seated. It is very limited in items that you have to bring in the car. There's not a lot of pieces. Everything is together on these simple cards. That way you can provide an educational element to your travels without necessarily having to have a whole bunch of different pieces. Let me know if you have any suggestions, or if you have anything that you have found in your travels with your toddler or your newborn to keep them entertained that I haven't mentioned, so that way we can help out this mom and any other moms that do come across this episode. But there are a couple of things though too that I want to point out for parents when you're going through this situation. So the first thing is, again, depending on the length of your trip, make sure you pack lots of snacks and get a spill safe cup. So I have found that the 360 cups work really well, especially if your toddler's already very used to having interacted with those types of contraptions at your own home, versus having a cup with a lid or a thermos type drink, because it will keep the liquid from spilling all over their car seat. Also, I have found in my travels that it's really nice to have a dedicated bin or an extra bag to put trash that happens to be acquired throughout your travels, and you can't very easily dispose of things. I also like to keep wipes. I mean, does any mom go anywhere without wipes? And a little bit of extra water, not just for drinking, but also for cleaning up stuff, because sometimes depending on what is spilled or what mess I'm cleaning, the wipes don't quite cut it as far as how much water I need to be able to take care of whatever it is that I'm cleaning. Now, since your toddler might also be in the process of potty training, this may be a great time to evaluate, maybe does it make sense to put them in pull-ups or back in a diaper for your car trip. Now, if you're concerned that that may confuse your toddler, or it may end up causing a regression, or if they're doing really well in the bathroom, but maybe you're concerned that they might fall asleep and then have an accident, you can get car seat seat cover pads to protect your car seat if they do have an accident and you don't want to put them in pull-ups. And again, I'll link these resources so that way you can start some research and pick a brand that works for you. I don't really necessarily have one that I'm suggesting, just something to think about. If you are going to be making lots of stops and it's not realistic for you to, get from your home to your destination without taking bathroom breaks, when we were going through our potty training stage, I actually got 2 toilet seats. I got one for home and then one to clean, but since I didn't always have both of them dirty at the same time, if I knew we were going to be going somewhere, I actually packed that potty seat with me in the car and I just put it in a trash bag, because when you go to a rest stop or if you're at a restaurant and using the bathroom, it can be really intimidating for that toddler who now is used to using the potty to have to, interact with a very large unfamiliar toilet. So I have definitely used a toilet training seat in those situations, and I've been so glad that I've brought one. And the fact that it can fit in like a kitchen trash bag, and if I have a large oversized diaper bag, which I did, I could kind of basically stuff it in there without it looking like, oh my goodness, who is this mom carrying in like this huge toilet seat and a step stool. So if you don't have something like that already and that makes sense for wherever you're going, just kind of consider that as well. Depending on your model of car seat, see if it can recline. Now, with most infant car seats, they're already going to be reclined and rear facing, but with some toddler seats as well, you can, they do adjust so that way they can recline a little bit more. And this is super helpful in the case where your toddler may fall asleep and their head slumps forward. This is actually not a very safe position for them to be in while you're driving, and it will just make them more comfortable if they do happen to fall asleep. So if your car seat has that adjustment or attachment, definitely look into that and maybe consider if that's something worth changing for your travel. The final thing that I just want to kind of put out there is that typically it has been really helpful for me to just be aware that wherever we're going, that the journey getting there is part of the experience. And to just even though I may feel super apprehensive about the fact okay, this is going to be a really long time, there's probably going to be meltdowns, there's probably going to be things that we didn't plan for, just already having that expectation of knowing okay, we are not in a rush to get there, that this is part of the experience. And also knowing whatever comes up, we're going to adjust it when it happens, and letting myself kind of feel that grace, and if I can, giving ourselves a little bit more time and mentally planning the fact that, okay, this is going to take longer than I'm expecting it to, just because of the nature of how it is with traveling with kids, helps me not feel so anxious and feel so rushed, which has risen my anxiety in the past to know okay, it'll be okay. We will get there eventually, and we will all be in one piece when we arrive. And depending on whether or not you're a night owl or an early bird, is if you are going to be traveling for a really long time, just consider whether or not it makes sense for you to leave either early in the morning or late at night, depending on how long your trip is. So when we used to travel across states to visit our extended family, and there would be times when we would actually start driving really, really late at night and plan to drive through the night. Now, the caveat here was that there were 2 adults to help with alertness and help with, who was driving when, and so that way we both could rest. That may or may not really apply to your situation, but we have found that as we've had more kids, and we've gotten older in our life, we have preferred actually going to bed really early and getting up really early and starting our travels then. And so we like to start our trips and get up around the 3 a.m. time frame and then be on the road at least by 4. And so typically, because there's all of this adrenaline, I have found for me, whether or not this is true for you, there's all of this adrenaline keeping me awake, so that way I'm super alert. It also allows me to start drinking coffee and caffeine way earlier in the day. And then as the sun is rising, I'm kind of feeling like I'm kind of coming off of all of that caffeine, and you have like a natural slump because the sun is rising. It's actually increasing my alertness to feel like, oh, it's the daytime. It actually helps me feel more alert and awake than if I was like driving really late at night. It just got more and more dark and there were fewer and fewer people on the road. Hopefully you find that helpful, but kind of let me know what your thoughts are on either of those. And again, it really does depend on how long your trip is. Don't be scared to break it up into two days or more. I know that sometimes it can be a issue with finances and whether or not you have the means and also the time frame and availability to break it up into several days. But I think, as I have learned for myself anyway, that as our trips become more and more complicated and there's more potential for stops, that I, as a mom, just need more time. And I've realized like that we as a family also need to make shorter trips, and we just need to extend the length of our journey because of the fact that we do need to stop more often. And because we're stopping more often, that means that sometimes now, looking ahead in the current season maybe that means that our trip that we used to be able to push to 1 day needs to extend to 2. So I would love to know what you found most helpful. If there's another activity or another piece of entertainment or a tip that you have found that really works for you, let me know in the comments and we can continue our conversation there. But until we hang out again, I hope you create a home your heart loves.